Hey, it's Dave Brown here, host of Now with Dave Brown on AMI. Check out this latest highlight from the show. The A11Y-TO camp took place over the weekend in Toronto. The camp brought together a whole bunch of people to talk about a wide range of accessibility issues. Matisse Hamel-Nelis was there. Matisse is the principal of Matisse Nelis Consulting. Hey, good morning, Matisse. Nice to have you in studio this morning.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm really excited to chat about the camp.
So forget making the trip down the 401 today. Why'd you make the trip into town to attend the events over the weekends?
I love driving. No. The reason why I attend the camp, I consider it one of the best days of the year, to be honest with you. There's so much learning and networking that can happen in the matter of, 8 hours that you're there. And the topics and themes that are discussed are all very relevant, and you get to learn more about accessibility in the digital space as well as in the lived environment, depending on what the sessions are that are being covered. And this year was phenomenal as per usual.
There are a bunch of presentations. There's a ton of breakaway sessions as well. There's networking opportunities. What was your big takeaway from being there?
My biggest takeaway was actually learning about the accessibility maturity model. Sherry Byrne-Haber talked about it in her presentation, and it's something that really resonates for myself, but also when you're talking to businesses and organizations about digital accessibility and accessibility as a whole, because they usually say, well, how can we add that into our KPIs? How can we measure what accessibility is? And so for me, that was one of the biggest takeaways from that. There were other presentations that I attended, one focusing on hiring best practices and what you should consider when you are going through even just the interview and application process all the way through the onboarding, which were really interesting and resonated with me as somebody who identifies as having a mental illness. So I have bipolar type 2, and I'm very open about that, and ADHD, and seeing and hearing how the hiring process can actually be shifted if I request certain accommodations that I've always been sort of timid to ask about. And that was really inspiring, and, it opened up doors for me just thinking about that. In my own self, starting my own business, and when I start to hire folks on, hopefully in the future, fingers crossed, what I can do to be a fully accessible and inclusive employer that way.
One of the words that's been rolling around my brain for the last couple of years in the accessibility space is continuity, that it's not about singular policies or singular accommodations. And it sounds like perhaps that's becoming the standard now, that it's not just about a singularity policy, it's about an overarching policy that involves continuity.
Exactly, and that's 100% correct, because a lot of businesses and organizations are starting to realize accessibility isn't a one-stop shop in terms of check that box and that's it. Things are growing, things are evolving, things are changing people's needs, and people's being comfortable with sharing what they require and what their accommodations are causing them to have to change and adapt, which means it's going to be a continuous process, and it's never just going to be, one and done type solution.
And the best practices are going to evolve, and the technology and the actual accommodations themselves are going to evolve. So even if you had a robust, incredible policy in 2015 and you were an industry leader, you don't get to just sort of say, okay, that's done, we're finished, fire the accessibility officer.
Exactly. And even something as simple as, if you take it back down to like a document, like a PDF document going back several, years, people would have said, I made the most accessible PDF document. Well, now there's the new ISO standard that just came out that says, actually, there's a few little tweaks that we're going to make, right? And it keeps changing and evolving as technology and assistive tech gets better and better. So it's, what was, like you said, in 2015, you were best of the best. Now you have to kind of go back and be like, okay, well, we're going to tweak a little bit. We're going to adapt. We're going to adjust and get to the point where, for now, you may be the best of the best, but knowing to stay best of the best, you have to keep evolving and changing.
Even though PDF is a 3-letter acronym, it's been a 4-letter word for a long time for screen reader users. But again, that speaks to evolution. Companies moved in and said, we will find a way to make PDFs inclusive and accessible. And now that's the standard across the board, even when you go into just your basic Microsoft line of products.
Exactly. And it's not just, the documents, but it's also the way we're speaking and the way we're being more open and welcoming of people who are willing to share their lived experience, and, being and not just being comfortable with them sharing their lived experience, but being comfortable with being uncomfortable and saying, okay, I didn't know that. How can I adapt and make it so that you feel included in what we're doing?
I want to come back to this past weekend, but
Yes.
also your experience with these kinds of events, because you've presented and spoken at them.
Yes.
This weekend you were an attendee.
I was.
How do you end up experiencing the event differently from those different perspectives?
Yeah, when you're a presenter, if you're like me, you're very anxious before your presentation, right? So you're attending the other sessions, and I don't think you're maybe necessarily getting as much out of them. You're taking all your notes, you're absorbing everything, but maybe not to the same extent because you're thinking about, okay, well, I'm going to present, your anxiety is a bit higher, so on and so forth. As an attendee, I got to have that fully immersive experience of just taking everything in and really participating in a way that I feel I only get when I am an attendee only. And it also allows you to network in a different way where, you know, you can help promote the speakers that are there. And so it changes the whole mindset of when you're going to a conference. When you are the attendee versus the presenter and attendee.
I've never presented necessarily at a conference like this, but I've covered them from a documentary perspective. But I have also just attended them for professional development.
Yeah.
And I have to say, when you don't necessarily have a concrete to-do list, you're actually able to digest the information a little bit more.
Exactly. And again, I think it goes back to that anxiety or the nerves that kick in when you're a presenter in particular. But when you just get to sit back and just let everybody teach you, versus you thinking, I'm also going to teach them. And if I was a presenter or when I'm a presenter, it's sort of like, what question might I get asked that might stump me? Kind of runs through my head. Versus here, it's like, I want to be present entirely for the presenter, get everything that they're saying to me, and start thinking about how can I fully apply it into what I'm doing day to day.
You have lived experience as a member of the community. You've also been studying accessible communication and accessible media. You've also been working in the industry for some time. Why did you eventually decide to start your own business?
Excellent question. So I decided to start my own business because I felt that there was this gap, particularly in my field of PR and communications, working with agencies who help businesses and organizations promote their message and get their, products, services, whatever the case may be, out there. And there seems to always be this disconnect between, hey, we're a major company, but we use an advertising or a marketing or PR agency to help us with our messaging, and the agencies themselves not fully understanding what does it mean to be accessible, right? There's still that notion where we're accessible because we just have captions, and that's it in our videos. And it's so much more than that. It's about the words and language that is being used in the communication. It's about adding described audio to your videos, not just captions. It's about making sure the documentation being shared is accessible and feedback is available, or feedback opportunities are available. And so it's a matter of educating others in my field on how we can really build an inclusive and accessible realm of PR and marketing, because we are the storytellers. And if our stories aren't accessible and inclusive, we're missing out on a huge opportunity to not only engage with an incredible group of individuals, but also their stories can really impact and resonate with what the brand's trying to tell.
I was doing some research over the weekend about some disability-related financial products, and I ran into the plain language issue over acronyms, plain language, and there seems to be, it's over and over and over again. There's a debate between the aesthetic and the message.
Yes.
And you hear this in the tech space all the time. How am I supposed to make a beautiful website but still adhere to accessibility principles? And now I'm starting to see this more and more in communication. How do I say something beautiful and poetic but put it in plain language? And I would say it's actually not that difficult to do. You just need to change your approach.
It's true, and it's not that difficult, and if anything, you're going to be more poetic and more engaging by going into plain language, right? Because you're going to resonate and get more people attached or gravitate towards what you are trying to say, because they'll be able to understand it better than adding in a bunch of jargon and thinking that, well, that just sounds beautiful to me in IT or in finance or whatever the case is. And, even with something as simple as an acronym, I learned the hard way myself. When I was working at the CNIB Foundation, my second day, I used Did You Know acronym, which is DYK, and learned through one of my colleagues, it doesn't read the way I thought.
Oh, no.
So from the national account, that is what I did. And that was sort of my turning point into, what do I not know about digital accessibility as a professional communicator? And I immerse myself into learning more. And that's sort of the story I tell agencies and those individuals and businesses I work with. This is how I learned about it. I made the mistake and decided to learn from it. I don't want you to make the same mistakes I have, so let me help you.
I'm going to wrap this up on the notion that we explored before of maturity and growth and evolution. You're now working in this space with businesses. How do you perceive the way the appetite is changing? Because I think we've all sort of realized that the ethical and moral point of view of making your content accessible and inclusive is there. And frankly, if someone doesn't have that moral or ethical belief, they're probably not going to shift. But what about the actual appetite for doing the work?
It's funny, in Ontario, we have the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act coming up to being fully implemented in 2025. So that's been a real push for businesses that I've been working with to make sure that they are being inclusive and they are being accessible in what they talk about. But it's also the appetite just to learn more and realizing there is such a big group that is being ignored unintentionally. We're going to think positively, unintentionally being ignored by the content being put out there. And when people look at the potential revenue that could come from really engaging with that community, right? If you're a small business or a larger business, the bottom line sort of helps them be like, okay, we need to do this. So while there is that ethical side of things that we should do this, it's a human right to do this, right? Everyone has access to information. There's also but what's the financial gain for us? So playing it on both sides that way has really helped.
I do like your optimism. It's always good to have optimistic people around me because as a jaded journalist now, I lean towards pessimism. Matisse, on the way out the door here, I do want to pose the daily poll question to you, and then I'll give you a chance to give some points of contact for where people can find you and the work that you do. At Accessible Media on X, at Accessible Media Inc. on Facebook. Spring is in the air. What is your favorite multi-sensory spring experience?
I'm going to have to say the birds chirping, whether it's a crow or any other bird. It's it's something I love. And also I'd have to say my dogs barking, trying to chase the squirrels in our backyard that are all suddenly appeared, and they're just like, oh, friends. So that would be the other one.
You do have some cute dogs. They're sheepdogs, right?
Yes, Old English sheepdogs, Agnes and Edith.
My gosh, adorable. Matisse, points of contact in case people want to find you and the work that you do.
For sure. So you can visit my website, matissenelis.com. So that's MATISSENELIS.com. Same handle on Instagram and Twitter, or X, Matisse Nelis, and on LinkedIn, Matisse Nelis.
Right on. If I had my way, I'd still call it Twitter as well.
I know.
But the word came down from the top. Matisse, thank you for this. Have a great day.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's Matisse Nelis, the principal of Matisse Nelis Consulting. Just another mention here for A11YTO. They're going to be holding their annual conference on October 3rd and 4th, and you can learn more about that organization by visiting A11YTO.com. Do you want to dive into more conversations like this? Watch Now with Dave Brown weekdays at 9 a.m. Eastern on AMI.TV or download the podcasts wherever you listen. Do you want to dive into more conversations like this? Watch Now with Dave Brown weekdays at 9 a.m. Eastern on AMI.TV or download the podcasts wherever you listen.